Hi, this is your host Satyan Bhartia and welcome to TFiR Newsroom. And today we have with us Catherine McGarvey, Vice President of Software Engineering at VMware. Catherine, it's great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, Swapnil. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And today we are going to talk about Tanzu Application Platform version 1.1. If I'm not wrong, 1.0 was released early this year. So tell us what new improvement, what changes are there in this release? What's new there?
I'm really excited to sort of walk you through it. So we've got a couple of key changes I'd love to share. So the first one is expanding on Tanzu Applications Platform view of a cluster. We're now supporting multiple clusters. This is really important for as a developer. You want the visibility and ability to localize and think about each environment separately. So you don't want your dev clusters running in, say, production. So we've identified this need and enabled sort of three key ways to support multi-clusters. The first is that ability to have different production environments. The second is the ability to promote between them. And the third is the visibility of runtime resources themselves. So you can see what's happening on each cluster at the same time and have that control across the group. Another key feature that's come out in this release is understanding that profiles were a big hit. This idea of how many of Tanzu Application Platform packages should be installed in each cluster. We've now optimized the platform for different install plans. So for example, we have the full profile still, so all the components installed in that one cluster. We have iterate, which means all of the components for that application delivery and application development in a cluster. We have build, which is working on workloads and software supply chain pipelines packages for the cluster. Run, which is your runtime components, how to serve your applications, and view, which is separating out the UX experience and things where we're pulling display into a separate cluster so we can create greater security for each cluster, but also utilize those resources well for each individual cluster as well. Other key features I just want to highlight, we introduced the supply chain in our first release. And as part of that, we were looking at how do you get from your source code to production quickly. And a key part of that was utilizing build service and the build packs concept. So your middleware was separated. So if you were impacted for Log4j recently and you're an application developer, because of Tanzu Application Platform, you wouldn't have had to update your application at all. That middleware would have been done for you. With this next release, we sort of recognize not every application can utilize our build packs. Perhaps you've got some existing applications, perhaps you've invested a lot in Docker images. Now you can bring them with and plug them into that supply chain so that they're another key part of that path to production. And then with that supply chain as well, we've introduced a UX experience. In our 1.0 version, it was just an API and CLI you could use. Now you've got a UX experience that's highlighting that path to prod. It's highlighting where there has been an error or an issue in your supply chain, and it shows the moment you commit your code where it's tracking through on that path to prod as well. So creating that visualization, I think, is really great. And then Swapnil, the last key feature I really wanted to highlight is role-based access control. We know from a security standpoint, we really want to minimize the landscape that a user can see. We want to go for a least privileged access and control. We've identified that this is a key feature. We wanted this to utilize the Kubernetes role-based access control. So even though we're going to start with what we recommend as 5 starting roles, a customer can still customize this further based on their own unique security landscape. The 5 initial roles are app viewer, so you can view the state of your app editor, so you can create, edit, and delete workloads or deliverables, app operator, so you can do the same with supply chains. And then we have 2 service-based roles. Workload, which enables you to run a workload, and deliverable, which enables the service to create permissions to create new workloads. Those are the kind of 5 key features that are really compelling and part of Tanzu Application Platform 1.1.
Excellent. I'll just quickly talk about the security aspect you're talking about. Developers or operators, depending on who you look at, they can plug in their own container images as well. What about the security of those container images? Because sometimes folks pull container images, they don't even know where it's coming from, and it could have a lot of dependencies, libraries, and packages.
Yeah, so we've done some work on both scanning and signing so that you can actually validate that the image you've made is the actual image you're pulling. And that plugs in really nicely to that supply chain choreographer. And you can customize that further if there's additional policies you want to make sure get established as part of bringing in any pre-built image too. So important because, yes, the state of pre-built images out there can leave a lot of vulnerabilities in place. So we've started down that path, and we're looking at doing more integrations in that space soon too.
Excellent. Now, Tanzu has been around for a while. Actually, in the cloud native world, has been around for a while as a term, which is very loaded, right? Things are so new here. But how have you seen the evolution of this platform? Because when we do look at Kubernetes or cloud native world, it's very complicated. Things can be intimidating for users. So talk about how it has evolved to solve some major challenges that teams face today.
Yeah, for sure. I think Kubernetes is the starting point, not the ending point for developers. It's really hard if you were just getting started and deploying an application and trying to get even the basic ingress working. It takes a lot of CRDs, a lot of YAML to get that out of the gate. So what we're seeing is a whole bunch of different companies and open source communities really trying to build on top of Kubernetes and extend its functionality and essentially move the abstraction layer up. So developers shouldn't have to be wondering, is it node port or service port or what they're trying to do from a networking standpoint, and shouldn't have to have that in-depth knowledge. So what we're particularly seeing is there's lots of new work in the open source, and that's really exciting because when everyone's seeing that the challenge here is how do we simplify the landscape and how do we push that abstraction up, we get to invest a lot in open source as a result as well, because we're seeing that's where the community is heading around Kubernetes. And like the role-based access control is new. The service claims work that's been going on is really new as well. And so it's hard to both innovate and stay up to date with what's happening out there. But I think as a result, our customers are really getting the newest stuff, but also it validated in a secure way, which is really important too.
And you mentioned, Kubernetes, is kind of a starting point. And all these technologies also, in the end, what matters is what business somebody's running. They have to serve their customers and clients. These are just means to reach there. Can you also talk about what direct impact Tanzu Application Platform has, not only on the lives of developers, but also helps businesses, to move faster, grow faster, respond faster?
Yeah, I think you nailed it when you said they really want to focus on their business outcomes and not all of the piping and plumbing to support it. And I think for the app operator and the platform operator and the security side of our customers' needs, rather than spending time plugging all of these different disparate technologies and different communities products together, they start from a common baseline, a common CLI and API that they can utilize. And now we're talking about how do we make sure auditing is throughout the platform done well? How do we make sure bill of material exists for everything you push to prod? How do we give that view of how all the applications are running and what utilization they need at one point? So it gives them a common interface. So rather than configuring Flux and configuring Knative and configuring Carvel and all these other tools we're working with, they can come and say, okay, here's the interface. I can tell you what the state of my system is. I can tell you how my developers are using it. I can tell you from a secure standpoint whether we're vulnerable on any of these points because I have that single interface I'm able to use to see it all. But if that's insufficient, I can drop down to kubectl. I can dive deeper at any point. I'm not blocking that access, but I'm making it simpler for those sorts of roles as well.
Excellent. One more question that I want to ask you is that the fact is there is a gap in supply and demand of talented folks who do understand all these cloud native technologies. Sometimes it can be a hindrance. A lot of companies, they do want to embrace, but they have to slow down. At the same time, companies, they do rush and embrace, and then they don't have folks, so they tend to make mistakes, and those mistakes could lead to disasters. It could be security, it could be a lot of other things. What role is Tanzu or VMware playing to make it easier for folks, once again, businesses, to embrace this technology without having to worry about, having all those in-house technical expertise?
Yeah, I think that's really important. How many subject matter experts do you need to understand the full platform? There's a whole bunch of things we're doing. We have our Learning Center piece, which is trying to explain and break down how all these pieces fit together. So one of the first things you can really do is help with education. How do these systems work? You shouldn't have to be up to date with the 20 different open source communities in this space or the more just to be able to run and deploy your application. But you need to know some level of understanding. So if something goes wrong, you're able to understand how to triage it and do that well. So I think there's a lot of training that benefits in this space too. But again, the more you can keep your developers focused on the business value they're operating in, understand enough of the system to know what you need to do, that's where the value in the sweet spot is. If you're going for expertise for every one of those developers, you're going to start to look for a unicorn, someone that likes to write application code and do DevOps and triage issues and do SRE. And it starts to really become very difficult to hire if you go down that path.
Of course, there are certain things that you can talk about at this point, certain things you cannot. But if you can just share, what's the future, what's in the pipeline, what does the roadmap look like for Tanzu Application Platform?
Yeah, there's. I keep mentioning open source because there's just a lot out there. We're constantly looking at. We are looking at how to integrate and utilize cloud-based service-provided services. So your data services, your databases, all of that side of thing. How to do that well in an extensible way. The service claims work has been really fascinating as part of that. As an application developer, I shouldn't be managing credentials, right? So how do I get access to that data service? We're doing a lot on just that install experience. How do we make that simpler and simpler? And focused on that what we're calling sort of the inner loop, that developer experience local to your machine, additional IDE and tooling extensions there. So you're getting faster feedback without even having to commit your code to the repo to sort of see it live and running to get that feedback loop quicker. And then we are looking more and more into how do we just improve that UX experience so that you are able to see what your state of your workloads are at any one point. This latest release doing across clusters, we're looking at additional things we can do to just improve that feedback loop on that side too. And of course, deeper cloud integrations. I think there's a lot that's different per each public cloud. So we're spending a lot of time looking into that as well.
Yeah, and since you talk about that, we live in a multi-cloud hybrid cloud world. So how it's not just being able to work between teams, but also between infrastructure as well. Catherine, thank you so much for taking time out today and of course talk about this release and also share some insights and also what are the things you should be excited about in future about Tanzu. So thanks for sharing all those insights and I would love to have you back on the show. Thank you.
Thank you, Swapnil. It was a pleasure.